Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to week 14. I can't believe it's week 14 already of the Edge breakdown with Hilo and myself. If you're listening to this on podcast at your favorite 1.5 speed, don't forget you can see our pretty faces on YouTube with some data breakdown. We're going to break down 5 games for you this week. We have the Jets at the Bills, the Browns at the Bengals, Vikes at the Lions, Eagles at the Giants, and Ravens at the Steelers. And if you're watching us, you'll see we're getting this recorded a little later Saturday. I unfortunately had a funeral yesterday for my wife's family, and you can see Mark in his uniform because he's working because the man has like 9 jobs. So, welcome everybody. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, man, doing great. Yeah, excuse the poor lighting. I am currently in a fucking cubicle office in Phoenix, Arizona, while I'm doing drill. So, man of many hats, they're all coming on and off on the daily. So,
Yeah,
let's get it, man.
Yep. So, want a quick recap last week? How did last week go for you?
Oh God, dude, I don't even remember. This week has been so crazy. Oh yeah, I didn't cash a damn thing last week. I didn't do shit. It was I actually shifted to a mix MME kind of mindset last week because I liked the slate from a perspective of there was a lot of different routes that you could go. I had all the pieces and like I cashed some of my route. I think I put 12 rosters into play. Some of them were cash, but I never had anything threaten anything. So it was kind of just like your weeks in DFS or best ball or whatever you're doing are basically like you're hunting to take down something. And the weeks that you don't take down something, you can expect to lose 40 to 60% of what you put in. So that's kind of like what it was last week, just lose like 40%.
Yeah, I was really close. So I actually figured out how to get the Hurts, AJ, Devonta stack in because I used Joe, Dotson, which ended up being great, right? He 5x'd his money, which is what we were looking for. I'm at 0.2 ownership. Kittle crushed me last week.
Yeah.
Right, like that was, and I had some Jimmy stacks I would have been interested to see how those could have gone with some of that because I had like Jimmy stacks with AJ, right? Like I was kind of all over it and just missed a little bit because my main back was Swift. I had Swift so I ran 20 lineups last week. I had Swift on 15 of them. So that first half I was sweating a little. I'm like, man, if they don't get him the touches, like I'm just dead. Like I'm dead in the water. And it got him to that, that 21 number that I needed. And I just missed having some of the right combinations. I was close. I was hunting. But again, I'm trying to win. It's better than swinging and missing. But I'm really happy that I figured out how to play that double stack of AJ with Devonta and Hurts. That was really nice, and because it was at such low ownership, I just said, hey, I'm not going to get this too many times, but man, it was expensive, so I had to get unique on the rest of the roster. Well, we're going to go right into breaking down the Jets at Bills game. As you can see, right, the Bills, almost a 27-point total. The Jets at 16.5. I really liked your write-up on this week. You had some really good breakdowns on how you want to approach this game. And I want you to talk about the Jets defense first and, how really underrated. It's not getting put in that conversation like you talked about with Denver and some of these other elite defenses.
Yeah. And I mean, excuse me. I think the Jets defense remains underrated, but what they have done has been nothing short of spectacular. We've talked about it before around the site, how they are approaching things. They have a below average blitz rate. They're able to settle into increased rates of zone coverage behind a defensive line and a linebacking core that has generated organic pressure. Very similar to a San Francisco prototype of defense, right? They are borderline elite on the back end. They are borderline elite up front, and they kind of just utilize that to their schematic advantage. They are a team that has elite talent on the back end in Sauce Gardner, in some of the other pieces in the secondary, and they are utilizing those pieces with layered coverages. So what that is doing is it presents uniqueness it presents like a unique something. I don't know how to say it. Jesus Christ. It presents a look to opposing quarterbacks that they don't often see because their defense is highly unique in the way that they function. They send strong side safety blitzes. When they do blitz, they send weak side linebacker blitzes. They send all these different unique packages. And the personnel that they have on the defensive side is very malleable. They're able to mix and match kind of what they're doing. So because of that, they are highly disruptive to opponent drives because they're able to send these unique looks that quarterbacks aren't really, not that they're not prepared for them. It's just that they're able to give different looks to different teams that their opponents haven't been able to see on film. So what that is doing is it's making it so that they are disrupting drives. They are allowed to run this offense that is a little bit more conservative. That's changed a little bit with the Mike White era entering the scene. But they're basically allowing, or they have allowed their offense to play this like, don't lose the game for us. Our defense is going to do what they do, and we're going to make sure that we disrupt enough drives that our time of possession is elevated, that we are allowed to basically adapt this like methodical mindset on defense that allows our offense to have a little bit more leeway. That's changed a little bit over the last 2 weeks now with Mike White entering the fray, in the sense that they're allowed to do a little bit more offensively than they have in the past. We've saw with Zach Wilson, extremely turnover prone, poor decision maker, poor pocket presence. They were basically
that's a very nice way to say that.
Yeah. So not an NFL caliber quarterback yet. Whether that happens eventually, I don't know, whatever. Like, that's over to Robert Saleh and the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator to develop him, but he's not there yet. They made the switch because they have Mike White, who is better at reading a defense. He is capable of attacking downfield at a better rate. His efficiency in downfield is better than Zach Wilson, who is just this like, screw it, YOLO, I'm going to toss the ball and see what happens. And he's also a lot bit better than Zach Wilson under pressure, who has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league under pressure this season. So what that has done is it has allowed them to not be as heavily reliant on their defense to win games for them, which is they want their defense to keep them in games. Now they're able to push the tempo. They're able to push things a little bit on offense to where like they can organically make some stuff happen now with Mike White in the fold. The other piece to that is Garrett Wilson and Mike White have an established like bro chacho connection at this point. Like to the point where
there's full on bromance going.
There is full on, dude. To the point where Wilson is the team is wearing like Mike F and White t-shirts as they walk into the stadium. Garrett Wilson is like talking to the media how he would go to battle for Mike White. And when Zach Wilson was quarterback, he was talking to the media about how the offensive woes are not his fault. So night and day, really, with like kind of the culture that they're
very similar to a situation we have in Seattle right now.
Correct. Yeah. So a big culture shift in New York. And this is still a team that's, they're elite on defense. They're underrated and elite on defense. And they play a lot of zones. So what does that mean for like this matchup? Well, I don't know. It introduces a wide range of matchup or a wide range of potential outcomes because of the fact that when you put strength on strength, one side typically wins out at like an extreme, at one of the extremes. You typically don't see like, I don't know how to best put this, but typically when you see a strength on strength matchup, one side is eventually going to give. When that happens through the course of a game, through the course of a season, whatever the case may be, one side is going to give at some point because this is the NFL. This is the elite of the elite. So like whether or not it's going to be the Bills that breaks through, whether or not the Jets are going to hold the Bills, whether or not we're going to see a similar game setup to the last time these teams played, when the Jets won by 3. There's a wide range of potential outcomes here. The other piece of that is Josh Allen is continuing to be one of the better quarterbacks against the blitz. The problem is, like we saw against the Jets in the first go round here, is the Jets are creating pressure without blitzing. And so while Josh Allen, sorry, dude, I'm like, I am freaking tits up today. I've been awake since 4 and just working. But anyway, while Josh Allen is now elite at diagnosing a defense, particularly against the blitz, where he has struggled in the past, now he is like PFF's amongst the top 3 quarterbacks in PFF grade against the blitz. The problem, like we saw in the last game, the last meeting between these two, is the Jets don't need to blitz to generate that pressure. So while Josh Allen has taken strides against the blitz, diagnosing a defense, reading the defense, seeing where it's going to come from, and picking the soft spot behind the blitz, he is still below average at processing when he's under pressure when a team is not blitzing. And that's kind of what Jets are going to throw at him this week. So there's opportunity. Josh Allen is this like leaning forward quarterback. He wants perfection every time he touches the ball. What that has led to is some of these mistakes that we've seen, these red zone interceptions, these ill-advised throws where he's trying to make it happen still, even though it might not be optimal to make that throw, is kind of what we've seen from Josh Allen this year. So that introduces another piece of this like wide range of potential outcomes. We could see some turnovers. We could see Josh Allen just light them up against a zone defense. They have Stephon Diggs, who is elite against zone. They have Isaiah McKenzie, who is a chess piece that they have utilized heavily against zone coverages. They have James Cook, who came on last week and basically matched Devin Singletary's snap rate, but saw 20 touches. So that's an interesting piece to consider this week as well. So a wide range of outcomes game is basically the name of the game here.
So how do you get exposure to this game? Do you want any? Are you willing to pay up for, Allen and Diggs, or is this, hey, I'm going to leverage off this and go another direction, especially when you talked about 2 strengths, right? Defense on defense. And, you have running back by committee and the Jets backfield, Carter's back. The Jets, obviously you're seeing the Wilson get the ownership because of that connection, but do you want any exposure here?
Yeah, Garrett Wilson and James Cook are probably the players that I want exposure to. James Cook is priced at 4.6, and if he's probably not, like, his likeliest scenario is probably not that he's going to see 20 opportunities again this week, but he's seen 2 games in a row with increased pass game usage. This team is obviously striving to change the way that they are approaching games, because last week we saw increased 21 personnel rates with both Nyheim Hines and James Cook on the field together. So they were playing around with that in the red zone. Nyheim Hines saw a couple of red zone receptions, was unable to get in the end zone. We saw him with a 1 red zone rush. We saw James Cook getting involved in the red zone. So this is a team that I think they're utilizing this the rest of the season, knowing that they have a playoff spot locked up. Well, now they're fighting for the top overall spot and the only bye in the AFC. So they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to figure out how they want to operate their offense moving into the postseason. And I think James Cook is going to be a vital piece of that puzzle for them. So probably, again, unlikely to see 20 running back opportunities, but there is upside here should he continue to see an increased role in this offense. That is amplified by the fact that a pass catching running back is a vital piece of the puzzle against a zone defense. So we could see another like 6 to 8, 9 target game from James Cook here, which would not surprise me in the least. Where he gains increased intrigue to me is the fact that the state of the slate at the running back position is much, much weaker than I think the field is giving credit for. When you see Derrick Henry amongst the top 2 owned running backs in a difficult matchup, when he has seen only 17 running back opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks, that kind of highlights the fact that the state of the running back position on this slate is pretty atrocious. So that gives increased intrigue to me and increased leverage to a near min priced running back at 4.6, who is coming off a 20 running back opportunity game. So I think there's interesting ways to play that. And then with Garrett Wilson, he has proven that he doesn't need to find the end zone to prove his fantasy relevance. His workload or his receiving load has basically been equivalent to like Justin Jefferson in non-Zach Wilson games. So that's and he is like 11th. I forget what exactly. I think it's 11th, but I wrote it up. Or I put it in the write-up. I think he's 11th in PFF grade against zone coverage this season. So, and the Bills have, the Bills have been one of the higher zone rate coverage defenses in the league. How that changes now with Tre'Davious White coming back, now healthy with Tremaine Edmonds, now healthy in the middle of the field, I don't know. But they have shown that they're going to play zone at increased rate. And they started the season with the highest rate of zone coverages before the injuries to Tre'Davious White and Tremaine Edmonds. So I'd expect Garrett Wilson to approach or surpass double-digit looks again. And at his price of only 5.9, that's something that we should have interest in here.
Well, speaking of high ownership running backs, let's talk about the currently projected number one owned running back this week in Joe Mixon. And we have the Browns going against the Bengals and a, big matchup over here. Again, we only have one team total this week at 50. We're, by Magetta again in week 14. And there's some interesting spots here. Deshaun Watson last week looked like he hadn't played a game in 2 years. That's how he looked to me. He looked super rusty.
That's weird.
Yeah. Shocking, right? You actually haven't played an NFL game in almost 2 years, and it kind of looked like it. Nick Chubb continues to be the guy that has a good floor, but is he ever really going to get you 5X, right? Like he never seems to have that 5X game. How are you approaching this? Is this a week where you think, we can start seeing, some more exposure to Deshaun versus the Bengals? Like, how do you like lining this game up?
It's another extremely wide range of potential outcomes game. We obviously have the known wide range of outcomes with Deshaun Watson. We obviously know that Cleveland is still not mathematically eliminated from the playoff hunt. How are they going to change what they've been doing against an opponent that is probably going to put up some points? We don't know. The other piece of that is I find it hilarious that Joe Mixon is getting the steam he is from some of the major talking heads around the industry this week.
I'm blown away by it.
Break down what Joe Mixon has done this season. Include his 5-touchdown outburst. Joe Mixon has an laughably low 2.5% breakaway run rate this season. That's 45th in the league. He has evaded a total of 22 tackles, which is 44th in the league, and he's done that at a top 5 snap rate at the running back position. He has an 11.1% juke rate. That ranks 52nd in the league. His 4.6 yards per touch ranks 36th in the league. This dude is he's a starting quarterback or a borderline workhorse quarterback or running back, on one of the top offenses in the league. But he has vastly underperformed his expectations this season. Also, you consider the fact that he has hit 3x his salary multiplier for week 14 only twice all season. And one of those was his a 5-touchdown eruption game. And the fact that his price has remained relatively steady the entire season. So with the fact that he is not producing, but his salary has remained relatively static, that indicates to me that he is being owned. People are rostering him through this whole thing. It's why? Why am I doing that? So again, the fact that Joe Mixon is expected to be the top owned running back on this slate speaks to how shitty the state of the running back position is. So that's another nod to hey, let's get a little explorative with our running backs this week. James Cook at 4.6 is interesting. I'm not going to be fighting the ownership on either of the two big name running backs that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, it's a full fade for me there. The ownership just doesn't make sense. So let's look at, though, how we get our exposure to the Bengals, right? We want exposure to this team. My man Boyd, speaking of that lineup, just crushing me, dropping that touchdown last week, right?
Yeah.
That was rough. But what I like is he got, again, what we expected in when Chase is in, Boyd has more opportunity. Walk me through how you've done with that as far. And when I say opportunity, he is getting options at a rate he hasn't seen in games that Chase has gone.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Chase is their field stretcher. Chase is their downfield guy. T. Higgins is more in line with a prototypical X-type wide receiver. He's he's the possession guy. He has the moderate ADOT. He's that kind of guy. Jamar Chase is lift the lid off the defense, take a screen 80 yards to the house. He is their upside piece. So when you have that back in the offense that is extending a defense vertically, you get that underneath stuff that opens up. So Boyd is particularly interesting from that sense, in addition to the fact that Hayden Hurst is going to be out for this game, which is kind of who he's been fighting for those middle of field targets with. So Boyd is interesting from that sense. Very, very manageable price at $5K. The pieces that are grabbing my attention the most from this spot are the quarterback in Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And I think that you can run a skinny stack with just those guys, add in Tyler Boyd if you want a full team stack. But those are the two guys that carry the highest upside. In games that Jamar Chase has put the slate out of reach, there have been 3 of those occurrences in the 8 games that he's played. That's an extremely high rate. That's like anti-Joe Mixon, right? Who's done like even 3x just twice in the 12 games he's played, or 10 games he's played. In those 3 games that Jamar Chase has exceeded 4x salary multiplier, Joe Burrow also has put the slate out of reach in 2 of them. So, and by put the slate out of the reach at quarterback, that's like you had to have him, because there are not multiple quarterbacks on slates this year that have like 35, 40 fantasy point upside. So if you miss out on that, you had to have that piece to win anything. A guy like Jamar Chase, if he puts up 35 points, you can kind of make up for that because there's multiple wide receivers usually that are putting up that type of score on a slate. So optimal theory would dictate, since that is the case, if you're playing Jamar Chase, highly consider Joe Burrow as a stacking partner.
I like that spot. Get in, get out, and move on with your salary. Well, we're going to move on. What is the highest game total of the week? We are going to talk about the Vikings at the Lions. I will say I kind of eye-opened when I saw Detroit open as a 1-point favorite. And now hold on, it's moved up to, I don't know if you've seen today, it's moved up to 2, right? And I can understand it, but I also think this is a spot that's going to get interesting, right? This is garnering all the ownership, right? Goff is projected at 1, Kirk is at 3, right? We got Sun God, right? At Jefferson, everybody's in here, right? Everybody's in play. This is another, weird week at tight end in terms of where salary is, not necessarily who you should play. How are you going to approach this game with it coming in as chalk and what we expect it to be? And are you going to try to leverage it? How do you come at this? How do you get exposure? Or is this, you're going to try to take a stand and pivot off and try to maybe get one piece of the game and then move on?
There's a lot of nuance to this game, because I think that the field is just like, this is the only game over 50 points. I have to get exposure. There's a lot of nuance from the sense that the Lions are a different team over the last 4 weeks than we have seen over the rest of the season, from the sense that to start the year, they were a very reactive unit. They wanted to run the ball and see what happened, see where the game environment took them in the second half before altering their game plan. Over the last 4 weeks, they're top 10 in pass rate over expectation. Like, they are doing it on their own now. On the other side of this game, the Vikings are viewed as this team that is going to push games. But then you look at like the underlying metrics of their team, like Kirk Cousins is bottom 5 in the league in intended air yards per pass attempt amongst regular starting quarterbacks this season. Justin Jefferson is putting up like an unreal fantasy year, but he's doing that on a very modest ADOT. So he's very much like in the Cooper Kupp role. It's like he's seeing the volume and he's seeing the schemed usage that is making him an elite, and he is elite in his skill set, but he's not really like seeing these high value downfield work. His value is coming from how they are scheming him the ball, and they're looking to get him in space with the ball in his hands. Same thing as Cooper Kupp. Like he'll see like downfield shots every now and then, but his primary focus of that offense is like, how do we get our best playmaker, Justin Jefferson, the ball in space and let him go? So that introduces like a wide range of outcomes from the Vikings as a team, in the sense that like they're not likely to be pushing things themselves. They have very much found their offensive success this season by methodically marching the ball down the field. So if the Vikings are controlling this game environment, it's likely because they are sustaining drives and they are eating up clock and all the things that go into how they want to try and win games, which leaves the Lions in control of this game environment, which is not what it was to start the season.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting dynamic and nuance of this game that I think the field is probably not likely to latch onto. As such, the optimal on paper way to play this game is like if you're going to play pieces from this game, stack Justin Jefferson with Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's it. Like just take the highest upside on paper plays from this game that correlate very, very naturally to each other and say like, this is the avenue to success. There are some very, very interesting leverage pieces, primarily from the Lions, because the Lions have shown that they want to run the football in the red zone. Jamal Williams, yada, yada, siphoning all of our upside. Jamal Williams is a guy who has proven that he can score 3 touchdowns and barely sniff 4x salary multiplier. That's unheard of.
It is mind-numbing for me. So especially in the terms of, for me, I want to talk about best ball for a sec since you brought it up. I have a lot of exposure to Swift, and I have a lot of exposure to Jamal because I was leveraging off each other. But the challenge of being in there where they are is I actually did some data diving, and I was trying to find anybody that's had the touchdown scoring that hasn't put up the salary multiplier that Williams has, and nobody's done it. Like it's unheard of in the history of DFS scoring. And obviously we got Swifty back. We talked about it all over OWS. Hey, Swifty's back. How does he do when he's not on the injury list? And, he got to his point total. I'm interested to hear what you think about, someone that's starting to get a little bit of steam. He's up to 6%, DJ Chark. How do you feel about some of those other leverage pieces in this game?
Yeah, I'll give a little sneak peek behind the curtain into the behind the paywall stuff, but I just got done writing the end around, which is like the game theory piece that is behind the paywall here. One of the comparisons that I made in that piece is Christian McCaffrey has averaged 7.6 targets and 13.4 rush attempts per game in his 5 games with the 49ers that he's played more than 28% of the offensive snaps. Obviously, that first game, he only played 28% of the offensive snaps. We're going to throw that one out. DeAndre Swift, over the last 2 seasons, when he has not been on the team's final injury report, which is a sample size of only 10 games, but he is off the final injury report this week. He has averaged 15 rush attempts and 6.5 targets per game over those 10 games over the last 10 years. So a higher, basically, running back opportunity total per game than Christian McCaffrey is seeing. Christian McCaffrey is the highest priced running back on the slate. He's expected to get some steam or some ownership. So basically, DeAndre Swift equals CMC in San Francisco. And he's priced at $2,700 less than CMC. That's an interesting angle, again, for the state of the running back position on this slate. The other piece that you mentioned is DJ Chark. One of the top ways that I listed as a potential way to generate leverage on this slate is Jared Goff, who's expected to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks, plus Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's expected to be one of the highest owned wide receivers, plus DJ Chark. Right. What that does is it lowers your combined per player salary for exposure to one of the top expected offenses on the slate. They have the second highest team total on the slate in the top expected game environment. And DJ Chark leads the league in average depth of target this season. So he is this team's downfield role wide receiver. So if DJ Chark succeeds, that directly correlates to increased fantasy production from Jared Goff. That directly contributes to that game environment potentially blowing up. So finding ways to get access or get exposure to one of the top expected game environments on the slate in ways that the field is not, super, super plus EV. So like think about running Jared Goff plus Amon-Ra St. Brown plus DJ Chark, bringing it back with Justin Jefferson. And now you have this, like, this is the way that this game environment could explode. And you're capturing bulk upside all at once. You're now betting on the touchdowns flowing through Jared Goff. So you're hoping that, God damn it, these pass catchers stop getting tackled at the one in Detroit.
Gosh.
Which has happened all year.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable at this point. I'm going to give Dwayne McFarland a shout out. Most of you who are listening to this are going to know who Dwayne is. Dwayne is great at analytics, and he did a breakdown on Twitter a little bit about this week, and there's a cool thread about it. And it's just like, it's mind numbing at what they're doing with that.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy how many times a Detroit pass catcher has been tackled at the one this year. So there's very interesting ways. I think Swift and Chark are guys that can get there on their own that don't need this game environment to blow up. But that's a very interesting way to attack the game environment in a way that the field is not likely to do. I'm not going to. So I was just going to say, I'm not going to spoil some other work I did in the end around. Yep. That's the behind the paywall stuff. But suffice to say, the combination of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson is probably going to go under-owned on the same roster this week.
Yeah. So funny you said that. What I was going to tee up is we're out here putting out this content for you. This is for you to be able to see and learn. The behind the wall content, the inner circle content is second to none in our industry, I believe. I'll put our content from Hilo, from JM, from Mike, from Xanamir, from Sonic, from the entire team. Please, if I didn't say your name, it's not that I don't think you're not involved. We just Hilo and I are on a crunch for time today, and we are. What's there just in the DFS interpretation of this game, I think is amazing content. And every week the end around is super important to me from a DFS perspective. It's how I got involved in this community. I was a consumer, right? I've been a consumer for a long, long time, and I was just taking in the content, and it was making me better. And as I got to know everybody, I got to learn and grow up on the DFS side a little bit more with everybody here. So we're going to leave it at there for everybody to check out. Now we're going to go on to the NFC battle, right? We got the Eagles at the Giants, and what I think is an interesting spot, especially with some of the news we got with Saquon. Oh, hey, Saquon, maybe Dabble came out and kind of threw a curveball at us, with the news. Yeah. Again, at any time can AJ Hurts and Devonta break a slate, especially with Goddard out? Absolutely. How are you going to get exposure to this game, and what are your spots you're going to try to pick here?
I don't think I'm going to be prioritizing this game. The reason I say that is the Eagles lead the league in first half scoring this season. What they have been able to do to start games has been nothing short of impeccable. That said, they are bottom 5 in second half scoring this season. They are very comfortable eating the clock away, trying to sustain drives in the second half through the legs of Miles Sanders, through Kenneth Gainwell, through Boston Scott, through Jalen Hurts. And they are not pushing the tempo and that's also reflected in their pace of play. Top of the league in first half, bottom of the league in second half. So they're very comfortable just trying to get to the end of the game after they've established a lead. Are they likely to establish a lead here? I would argue, hell yeah, they are. The Wink Martindale defense is a heavy blitz rate. It is a heavy man coverage behind a heavy blitz rate. Against a mobile quarterback, that is a recipe for quick failure. And Jalen Hurts is likely to exploit that and exploit that well. He is very, very good. He has made massive strides in his ability to read defenses this season, similar to Josh Allen. He is able to pick up the blitz and either escape or find the holes behind it. The hole behind the blitz guy now with Dallas Goedert out of the lineup is Devontae Smith. They have altered where they're asking him to run his routes to kind of pick up the slack that was left behind that like short to intermediate, was lost from Dallas Goedert. They've also altered Quez Watkins' role in the sense that he is not just the downfield threat anymore. They're scheming him usage behind the line of scrimmage.
He's not just running wind sprints. It's amazing.
Yeah. So they have changed those two dudes into these both Quez is like all or nothing. He's like running downfield shit or he's getting work close to the line of scrimmage. Devontae Smith is running this expansive route tree now, and he's he's one of the top 5 route runners in the league. He's like Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown level of a route runner. So what he is able to do over the short to intermediate areas of the field has opened up that offense from the sense that now they have these very, very defined roles. So they're less layered in the sense that they have Dallas Goedert who is in the established role. And now they have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith that they can run these layered routes with. While that is a slight detriment to the unpredictability of the offense, it doesn't matter as much against the Giants because we know the Giants have been 50% man coverage rate almost every week of the season. They have been around 40% blitz rate every week of the season. So while a Wink Martindale defense is layered from the sense that you don't know where the blitz is coming from, you know exactly what the hell they're going to do. They are going to play man coverage at 50% of the time. They're going to blitz at 40% of the time. And while that disrupts teams in the red zone, the Giants are top 5 in red zone touchdown rate allowed this season. So while that disrupts teams in the red zone, while that disrupts drives, it isn't as effective against elite quarterbacks. It isn't as effective against mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts is both of those things. So I see this game highly likely is the Eagles are going to put up 21 points in the first half. The Giants are going to struggle to put up points in the first half. And that's probably going to lead to the Eagles being able to take their foot off the gas in the second half while the Giants are thrown into an area of uncomfortability because they do not want to find themselves trailing late in games. They are fighting tooth and nail to keep themselves in games late. And we kind of seen that's how they're approaching their season too. They took the Commanders to overtime and then played an extremely conservative game plan in overtime because they knew that they're playing the Commanders again in 2 weeks, and the winner of that game is probably going to secure one of the final playoff spots in the NFC. So Dabble is like a kick the can down the road. We'll handle it later. Let's just keep ourselves in the game. Highly unlikely to be the case this week. So I don't know that we see enough volume for AJ Brown, Devontae Smith to put the slate out of reach. And at their price tags, I think you can find similar upside with a higher floor elsewhere.
Yeah, the way I was actually describing how they're using Devonta now was how at the start of last season, how the Chargers used Mike Williams in the X role, right? They're giving him that kind of opportunity. You hit all the nails on the head. It's when I literally had this conversation with somebody. I was like, look at his route tree now. Look at how they're using him, where they're using him out of, and how they're scheming the ball to him. And I said, it literally reminds me when Mike was going off at the beginning of the year. That's exactly how the Chargers are using him. I was like, I'd be interested if you could like video overlay it. I'll bet you'd see some interesting comparisons there.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you talked about Hurts. I'm going to give a shout out to one of our other team members, Jay Reezy, who has that Hurts future on MVP. And he was very excited after last game, seeing that where it's going there. So, because everybody gave a lot of crap about betting at the beginning of this before the season. So I hope he hits it. All right. So we're going to move on as we're finishing up here. To our last game we're going to cover, which is the Ravens at the Steelers. And I'm going to start off with what I was shocked about when I opened up ownership this week. And I wanted to save it to tie into this game. So what I had originally thought about doing was I was like, man, this might be a really cool spot. And you talked about it in last game to go how we've used Justin Fields naked is use Hurts naked, right? They're blitzing at him. Hurts takes off. Hurts gets 125, rushes for a TD and, has, a decent first half throw in, and he can get me to that 4X number, right? He has the ability to get me there. And it would be, I just don't think anybody would be doing it because when I started looking at things, I am shocked at the projected ownership of Mark Andrews right now. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe it. If you go back to last season and look at the stats and what he did with Huntley and how that was Huntley's man, that was Huntley's safety blanket. That was, the target share is unreal. And then you look and you start looking at tight ends that are above Mark Andrews as of today. I don't think it's going to end here. Maybe it does, but I'm going to go probably all in. Let's talk about a couple that are ahead of him right now. Jordan Akins with the 13-point team total, Houston, Texas. Say that again, by the way. They only have a 13-point team total, right? Bellinger against an elite defense in Philadelphia, and I like Bellinger. Conklin, Fant, Hooper, right? I start looking at that going, okay, like I'm going to play him like I played Kittle last week. I'm going to figure out how to get the salary there and where to go and, take the opportunity that, hey, at the Steelers and a game that nobody's probably going to want to touch because of the low point total. And we're kind of seeing that in ownership going there. And I want to give a shout out real quick to Pappy last week. We talked about it. I played it. I'm also going to have one roster. I'm going to play this Steelers stack until it hits. I don't know if it's going to hit this season, but I think at some point it's going to hit. And at this point, if I don't play it, I think it's there. And the stack has shifted for me, right? I'm going Pickett, Pat, right? And I'm going Pickens. So I just don't know that I can go there with Deontay anymore.
Yeah, this is probably the ultimate example of like cross-platform or like cross-book arbitrage, like you would think of in like sports wagering, because Mark Andrews is the second highest priced tight end on DraftKings, but he's going in the third round on underdog drafts this week.
Wild.
So I have chosen to get all my Mark Andrews exposure over on underdog and not be forced to pay $6,500 on DraftKings. It's a little bit of that same, like I alluded to, like the arbitrage mindset of sports wagering, where you're line hunting, you're trying to find mispriced lines that overlap to where you're guaranteeing a win. And like, well, I'm not guaranteeing a win by saying like I'll have 40% of Mark Andrews over on Underdog, but I'll have 5%, whatever the case may be, on DraftKings. It's an interesting way to layer your exposure that I've been trying to fold into my habit pattern a little bit more this season. With that said, I would not fault anyone like yourself who's like, I want all the Mark Andrews in DFS this week. The only thing that leads me a little bit away from that, again, is that what you can do on Underdog is so much different than what you can do on DraftKings this week. For example, like the top 3 projected wide receiver plays on the slate are probably Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can feasibly play all 3 together on DraftKings, whereas on Underdog, those guys are all top 5 picks.
Yeah, they're off the board there.
So while, again, that arbitrage mindset, I really, really like Mark Andrews' upside this week, but I can get him from a 3rd-round pick on Underdog, where I have to pay a top 2 salary on DraftKings to get him. And I can't fit all those pieces together like I can on DraftKings with the wide receivers that I just talked about, or on Underdog, where it's like I can fit Jamar Chase and Mark Andrews, or I can fit Justin Jefferson and Mark Andrews in a draft. But I can't get like all 3 plus Mark Andrews. So I'm just taking the interesting dynamics of player pricing, of ADP, which is kind of like player pricing for best ball, and playing with those a little bit to get my portfolio to the exposure that I want it to be. So that's my stance on Mark Andrews this week. Kind of line shopping, getting a little bit of arbitrage betting mentality on him. But I obviously very clearly love his upside. Yeah.
It's so interesting. So you teed this up perfectly for me. So for those that don't know, I'm part of the props team with 1 week season. NBA is going out. We had a monster week at NBA. We were up $2,400 this week in NBA, which that's just an unreal heater. We'll take them when they come. But one of the things I'm using Underdog and Prize Picks and such for is this exact leverage point. So I'm also taking lineups like this and looking at their projections and saying, okay, I'm saying this is what I expect here. So if I lower my exposure on DraftKings, I'll raise my exposure from a pick'em side on Underdog, right? Or Prize Picks, and say, hey, right, here is the story I'm going to tell, right? One of the things we talk about, and Mark is really good at this, is if this happens, then this is what my expectation is. It's one of the things he teaches in his courses and really helps you understand that that's a great question to ask, right? So if Mark Andrews starts to break the slate, then where do I have my exposure is the question I ask myself, right? And I love him at DK. I love him more on the prop side this week. I think he's a great leverage point to say, okay, hey, here is his, receptions prop. Here is his receiving yards prop. And I believe he's going to hit over. And it allows me to also cover both sides of the coin. It's one of the things we're teaching our prop members in the paid area is how to get exposure to these. And instead of just building, 1 3-person lineup or 1 5-person lineup, build 10 of them, build 20 of them, build 30 of them a week, and take your player pool and get your exposure that way. And when you start hitting, right, when you start winning 3, 5, 7 of, 20, right, your ROI is going to be really good from an exposure side. And that's where game theory and DFS comes in with that.
Yep. Dig it.
So one of the things I want to end up with here is I want to talk about you and kind of blow you up here for a sec. Folks, if you're listening to this, you don't really get to see, but you can watch. If you're checking us out on YouTube, Mark is talking about this, unlike me, without looking at stats. Mark does this off the top of his head because he's basically Rain Man with this stuff. For those that are just getting to know him, those that are just starting to listen to this a little bit earlier, he has exposure here that is I am just impressive to watch every week, and I'm pretty good with stats. But the way you're able to memorize this and you see it, it just sticks in that brain of yours. It's really cool, and I think it's something that gives 1 week season because of who's helping create content here, gives us a leg up. So I want to give you a shout out for that, and it's just impressive to watch every week as we do our podcast.
Appreciate it, man. It's
Yeah.
fun.
All right, so a couple minutes left here. Week 14, right? I asked it. We talked about it. Who are you at? Where are you at as best balls? We're going to start playoffs, really next week. We talked about Fields. As you're starting to see your teams, like, a bunch of us got a few on the bubble, but this is who's going through. Who's your leverage points you see? And give me one or two guys that are going to be what you think is a huge leverage point opportunity.
Honestly, dude, it's tough for me to say because I'm checking it right now. I'm checking my best ball for the first time since we spoke last.
Okay.
Just because how hectic the weeks have been over the past couple of weeks, now that we're into holiday season, now that I'm taking on a little bit more NBC. So I've been super busy to where I haven't even looked. So we're going to do this live.
Awesome.
I have a lot of my teams that are projected to go through are Jalen Hurts doubles. So I got a lot of the AJ Brown and Devontae Smith going. I think I need Fields, man, and it sucks that he was hurt and then now he's on his bye in the last week prior to playoffs because I have so much Fields, dude. Other areas, I think, to answer that question.
Where are you at on running back? What's your running? Who do you need at running back?
Dude, I have so much Jamal Williams. It's insane. So while I hate his guts in DFS, like for best ball, he's actually doing me a solid here this season. And then I think just from a roster construction standpoint, I have a lot of teams that are 4 running backs. So like skinny running back teams that are open up upside, obviously, at other positions. So that's extreme variance embracing mindset to have. So it could go one of two ways. I could get shit on in the first round of playoffs, or I could have these really, really unique teams still alive late. So we'll see how that plays. That was something I messed around with for the first time this year, was the theory of like roster construction in best ball format.
And if you want to see how that went, go check out some of Mark's past Twitters. And he posted some of those lineups and the response he got to those. I am excited to go back and see once we get into the playoffs here. I actually bookmark a couple of them just because
nice.
I love the comments. Yeah, because I was like, oh, this is what I want to check later, right? Because of the comments on it. Like, I mean, you were, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it was just
it took some heat.
So you did. So I'm interested to see where those go.
That's the fun of theoretics, is like nobody knows the answer, but we're just out here. It's an experiment. We'll see. So,
all right, everybody. Well, we're going to end up here. Once again, if you're not listening to this in podcast form, you come check us out on YouTube, and hope everybody runs great this week, and come check out our content in our Discord. Talk to you guys soon.
See ya.